Up, everybody? Welcome to the Age of Quarantine. I'm David Castillo from Saint Vitus Bar, and welcome to this wonderful Monday edition of the Age of Quarantine. I hope you're all well. I have one of the greatest hardcore singers of all time, Tim Singer, from Deadguy, Kiss It Goodbye, Bitter Branches, etc. No Escape, here to join me tonight. Total legend. Absolutely love everything about his singing style and everything that his bands did back in the 90s and like early 2000s, kind of really inventing a lot of kind of metallic hardcore and all that stuff in the process. And then as well, he is an amazing artist, really great designer with Process Black, and just doing all of that sort of stuff, and has started a new outfit called Bitter Branches, which is really awesome, a little bit more on the noise rock tip. So stoked to talk to Tim Singer tonight. Let's see if he is around here. Boop, boop, boop. Here's Tim. And now add Tim. And I got a nice sour Volks beer ready to rip. And yeah, cheers. Whoa, Singer.
Hey.
There he is. What's up, man? How you doing?
How are you, brother?
I'm good. I'm just pouring.
I'm going to turn off my laptop so it doesn't beep at me.
That's cool. We need a little bit of a setup. It's fine. A little setup never hurt anyone. I need a beer to lubricate my mind. You need to get the computer right. We're good to go with that. So, Tim, welcome to the Age of Quarantine. Thank you for taking some time out to join us, man. It's fucking great. Huge fan. Love what you do. And basically, we just take an hour to kind of get into, basically our guest's journey, through music, and kind of start really early on through childhood and stuff like that. So we go deep in until today. So we got quite the journey going. So, Tim, did you grow up in New Jersey?
Yeah, I did. I grew up in suburban New Jersey, a quick train ride from Manhattan. I discovered, I got, my older brother was super into punk. Shaved his head, had a leather jacket, was going to see Black Flag, Circle Jerks, Dead Kennedys, stuff like that. And
Older brother? Older brother?
Older brother, 4 years old.
Got it.
And so, of course, I sort of worshipped him. Then in my mid-teens, I started, for a number of reasons, to be sort of pissed off at the world, and I started to dive through his record collection a lot. Discovered Dead Kennedy. I used to just sit in his room and try to be cool, and listen to Dead Kennedys, probably Sex Pistols, Ash, stuff like that. Dead Kennedys blew my mind. He had the Too Drunk to Fuck 7. And I as a 14-year-old, I was like, do that? You say to fuck on the floor? I was like, totally hooked. And, I found, I never fit in high school in that sort of 80s suburban past kind of way. So I was part of the Tribe of Misfits, and listening to Suicidal Tendencies and Youth Brigade and Brad and all that shit, and trying to see shows in New York whenever we could. So yeah, I was like typical New Jersey kid, suburb, blessed, so close to Manhattan. You know what I mean? Where at first it was like Ritz shows. My first show was either Dead Kennedys or Circle Jerks, Ritz, in like 85, 86.
I was
the Cro-Mags blew me away, right? The Cro-Mags were like, holy fuck, right? The whole place just went nuts, right? And then I think the Cro-Mags, somehow I found out about CBGBs after that. I saw Agnostic Front in 86 at CB's, and all of a sudden those rock shows were big and corporate. So like,
yeah. I mean, at that time too, when Cro-Mags, there was a couple of times that they headlined the Ritz too, but it's like sometimes they would open for like Exodus, like metal bands too. So
right.
Kind of like not quite like the hardcore scene yet, but would you say that might have been like your first exposure to like, oh, this is more like the local shit now. Like, you know, like, oh, this is New York stuff, and I can find this other places.
Yeah, for me, I literally, I have a terrible memory, but you know, it was April '96, Agnostic Front at CBGB's, when I feel like I really discovered hardcore and punk, and the idea that, you know, as the stage is as high as my, you know, you can step up there, you grab the mic, you can sing along, you get in the fucking scary ass pit. You see Harley or Tom Joseph, they're in the pit too. Like all these New York icons are there at like every show, every CB's matinee. And it almost feel like there's a jersey. It'd be like a dare to go into the pit. Right? You bounce around like a fucking pinball. But if you fell, someone picked you up. You know, if you stage dove, people, you can surf the crowd, like, and you'd sort of look at your bruises afterwards as like a, you know, your clothes were, you're wearing your flannel butt flap. You're changing stories and looking at all your scratches and bruises. And,
oh yeah, especially at like shows where there was like a lot of punks too, you know, because obviously wearing so many chains and everything like that. And I'm kind of like you. I grew up on Long Island, you know, 45 minutes away. And yeah, I definitely had some wild nights at Coney Island High and stuff like that, like where this whole ritual was really like new to me too. And I was like, whoa, like people are fucking animals. Like, are you allowed to act this way? This is amazing. Maybe I should try it, you know? Like, okay.
So the crazy thing was when I graduated high school in '86, and my stepbrother, Dennis, who I just consider my brother, we're pretty much the same age, or 2 months apart. And we started together back in the day called Boiling Point. And that's how we ended up meeting a lot of, you know, we met Youth of Today and Gorilla Biscuits and all those bands back in the late '80s because we did a zine. In '86, we graduated high school, went out to California. My parents were going to China, and they wanted us do something. So me and my stepbrother rented a car in California for like 2 months in '86, and like followed Agnostic Front around. They were on tour. And the funny thing is, back then in the West Coast, it was like a circle pit that you see in like movies like Suburbia, right? Like,
yeah.
And there's like skinheads in the middle, and like this circle pit of like punkness, and like the skinheads would decide who to beat up because they had long hair, like that. Yeah, everything was a fucking different world, but
sure.
I'm glad I was part of that. I'm glad I sort of tapped into it. I always felt like the new school kid because I missed Minor Threat and all that kind of shit. But now looking back, I'm like, I sort of caught it.
Totally. And so you said that Boiling Point, that was a zine that you did with your brother and stuff like that. And I like that. Let's go to that for a second, because I feel like, especially like, there's always a way to get involved with music, right? There's a lot of, you can perform, you can take photos, design, all of these different things, right? And underground music is a great, I think, like incubator for doing like a lot of stuff like that. So for you, your first kind of interaction in trying to become a part of the scene in a way, or kind of contribute to it, was doing this scene, which is really, you're a designer, right? So that's a lot of, was that like one of your first ever design forays, or?
Yeah, you know, I was always like, you know, the art kid a little bit, you know, whatever that means in high school. Or, you know, I would take art classes in college when I went part-time. Didn't really know what to do. And then my stepbrother was like, my best friend, Tom Rock, and my stepbrother, Dennis Cheng, who actually is my brother. Dennis is the one, he was up in Boston, doing all these Boston slap shop, Wrecking Crew and whatever, right? And really into SSD and stuff like that. And he was like, starting a zine, you know, and I lived up in Pennsylvania at the time, and I'm like, cool. And then Tom Rock was like, I'm in too. So, you know, it was an excuse to go to shows and talk to bands and have a reason to talk to them, you know, not just like, the show was great.
Yeah.
love you. Thank you so much. Bye. Like, you know, it was like, can we interview you? And we'd go, we'd take pictures. And back then, like, not very many people taking pictures. So the band would be like, you know, can you send me the pictures? Like, I'd love to see them. It's funny because you just have Walter on. I remember, like, back in, like, 8, we and Walter, like, we all, like, loved Youth of Today. And we went to some, I think it was in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. We went to a show, interviewed Youth of Today after the show. It was like this amazing interview where the show ended and we interviewed the band and we all sort of sat on the floor and like other people on stage to watch the interview. And Walter the whole time was like, move to New York, man, move to New York. And that summer I actually sublet the apartment Youth of Today when they went on their first national tour. You know, moved in with my then girlfriend, now wife. Sort of port the Youth of Today archive of all the photos. Use that for our zine and stuff like that. So yeah, it was like all these things. Just in getting involved. I'm not a musician. I didn't promote shows, but you know, I wanted to document. But I give my stepbrother credit for starting things. But you know, we worked really hard on the questions, and we still have the mic sets from interviewing the bands, and we took the pictures, and we built dark rooms to develop the photos and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like this was like a real. It was an endeavor. It was a big undertaking to create these zines, but it was like they didn't come out all the time. The distribution wouldn't be that wide. But also, what's interesting is that you, in this time period, I think that's a little bit different than a lot of people do. Is like you had people in Boston. You went to Los Angeles. You got to see actually how people were kind of acting in other scenes and stuff like that. This is before social media and stuff.
Oh yeah.
You're like, you know, like, oh fuck, I didn't know that existed. Or I mean, unless it was a really top level band, you're not getting like the bands that are like underneath that could be fucking incredible, like really, really good, right?
Yeah, and like back then, it was like you would write you'd read about you know, I would scour the pages of like Maximum Rock and Roll, right? And like bands would sell demos, and I'd write them a letter if they sounded interesting, and then literally the mail like $3 for a demo, and you get a cassette back and a note written, you know. And later on, it might be like that was that band that became like half off or for an answer. What like always, you made all these connections, and it's funny because today it's a little like with this whole pandemic thing, I'm like locked in. And I'm connecting with bands I've never met because I'm almost like back like rights. Like if I like a band, I might ping them on something. And like I have all these pen pal friends now. And it reminds me of back in the day when I used to literally like write something.
Yeah.
Put it in a fucking envelope, mail it, and like a month later you might get something back. You know what I mean? Like
and that's really cool because that's like it's just really personal to kind of just go off and talk to an artist, and like you were saying before, there isn't literally like that big of a divide. Hardcore has never been about the divide as much as it is communicating and finding maybe community or common music to love and maybe ideals as well, right? And I think yeah, I do a lot of that too. I mean, you know, I book bands for a living. I've done everything, you know, at Vitus and a lot of things. And for me, I mean, I just find some band that I dig, and I'm like, hey, I'm Dave from Vitus, and I fucking Big Brave. I love your fucking band, and like I'd like to interview or you know, in normal times I'd be like, come play my bar, like let's figure it out, you know. But just like as a fan, I mean, that's the most important thing I think when you come across to, you're just like, hey, I dig what you do, and then all of a sudden you know, if the music's inspiring, usually the people behind it are too, and that's always really fun, you know. Like Walter telling you to move to New York.
Yeah. And it blows my mind that it's like, you know, 30 years later, and this network is still there, and it's sort of evolved. The interactive channels and all that kind of Bandcamp is a whole new thing. And, yeah, I'm psyched because like I went through that phase. I think a lot of guys, me, like I've been with my wife since before I did. Like we were a couple. We got 2 kids. You know, one of them's in college in Brooklyn. 2 of them are in high school. So I've been able to like sort of get through those years where you had to do everything for them, and now they're like interesting individual. I'm back to like pursuing like my sort of passions.
Yeah, interesting. So
And it's a
yeah,
little
like
bit-
they're kind of self-sufficient out in the world trying to be that, and now you're like starting bands and doing stuff.
right. And the scene, it blows my mind that the scene is like the scene, whatever that means, is still there, right? That it's hard to put your finger on it, right? Like, because it's not one scene, you know, like the New York hardcore scene, that's a big part of that. CBGBs every Sunday, or Rio on Saturdays after that, or what, or City Guard. All things come and gone, but somehow that whole like something was created. This network, this framework, it's still there. It's still thriving.
Yeah, no, I mean it's
It's a lot
definitely a diaspora of like people and like tradition and musical tradition that's sort of been handed down. I mean, I would kind of contend that almost hardcore and punk for like New York is like folk music at this point. It's like been handed down and it's almost generational in a way.
Right.
Like it's not the hardest thing to play, but you give it your own sauce, you give it your own kind of bent and move, and then all of a sudden, like, you know, there's a tradition to grow out of, which is interesting for something rebellious to sort of be traditional in the same way. But I think that those things sometimes can fight, but that's a good thing. I like to see that theater play out. That's cool.
Yeah, and there's something underneath it, or the foundation of it, that sort of outlasts fads, right? Like,
Yeah.
there might have been a certain look 80s and a certain look 90s, or a certain sound. Yeah, maybe, I don't know. That's what Ian, he sort of called it the free space. Like, to me, I always wanted to do, like, the early build I went to, the bands all sound different, right? Like, Cro-Mag didn't sound like the Dead Kennedys, who didn't sound like Socialists, who didn't sound like DOA, etc. Like all, you know, Gnostic Front or whatever. Like New York hardcore started a little bit similar. There's always enough going on. There's such a tight community that it was kind of cool. And there's other scenes around. There was, the scenes were much more regional back then, I think, too. Now with the internet and everything, like, region might not matter as much anymore. Might not be a sound associated geography as much as people like this fucking sound, and there's a ton of shit that sort of fits in that mold.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it doesn't have to be like this regional thing, like this sounds like DC or LA or anything of that nature.
Right.
So, speaking of regional sounds, to me, I mean, when did you, so you started doing the zine, right? And obviously a regional thing, like a Northeast thing mostly. When did you go, hey, I want to play music? Because this is a big leap now. This is a leap from, and not even just playing music, but fronting a band.
Right.
So, like, it's on, you know, there's a lot of willing to take that sort of, you know, focal point on, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it was like, so, you know, I did the zine, moved to New York, moved to Brooklyn, and, you know, my girlfriend, now wife, was like super cool. She's not a teenster, but she's seen a million shows that people would lie about going to, right? Like, she's been a million amazing TV shows and Anthrax and stuff like that. You know, we were that cool. If bands came to town, they could crash at my place, right? So I started, aside from just going to shows and taking pictures, I started to form some friendships with different, you know, people who stay at my place in Brooklyn. They were on tour. That's how I met Alan Cage from Quicksand. I met, you know, West Coast guys when they came to town. People sort of knew they could stay at my place. So that was like an extension of that. So I started to know a ton of musicians. And so me not playing an instrument, but me also being a fanboy and everything. Of course, I had lyrics if I ever, you know, was allowed to sing for a band and got lucky somehow. And I was just shooting, you know, I was shooting this shit with Steve-O from No Escape, my first band. I met him. I think he's a turning point. And he might have played for Gorilla Biscuits for a hot minute, and that's how I met him. Long story short, when I left New York, I ended up being his roommate. He came home with like a bunch of songs and was like looking for a singer. And I was like, okay, sign me up. And that was sort of I've been fantasizing about it forever. Not, like, no skill. In my mind, I sound like Ian MacKaye and all my Henry Rollins are all my heroes.
Yeah.
But like, I didn't even fucking sing in the shower, right? But I had a shit ton of lyrics. A lot of them like fucking cheesy because you're like writing your song about unity or all these like sort of hardcore scene focused. You almost have to get that shit out of your system. But like the fact that I lived as a guitar player, I think helps, right? So, and everything goes back to like just that first foot in the door of just entering that world however I could, right, as a participant and not just a fan. And I just sat. I remember we would just sit in his room, go over songs. But by the time we got our first practice and I had to sing out loud, I already knew 2 songs because I'd gone over them so many times. But we didn't know what I sounded like for real, like a shitty practice bass and a bass, until we recorded. And I liked how I sounded.
That's a really like damning thing, I think, for a hardcore singer. Always is like, you're like, yeah, man, I could do like this or like that, and then when you really hear yourself the first time, and a lot of times when you're writing songs too, I feel like kids nowadays are so sophisticated. I got like Cheddar from Candy over here, like, writing and like recording everything direct in, and like, and which is cool. Processes and things change over time, and like it's great. But like, for me, I was just like losing my mind in some practice space that's like this big, and like, I could never hear myself really until. And like neither could really my bandmates. So I totally remember, in Primitive Weapons, Artie from Mind Over Matter, who's like my business partner now, but one of my fucking heroes. Chris on the Might of Princes, is both co-hosts on the show, great friends too. But I'm like, damn, I don't even really know how this is gonna go. And they're writing great stuff, like they're amazing. And then like we all heard it, and I'm like, okay, I think this is gonna work. All right, but I've been working on these songs for like 6 months, So like, so once we got past that point, that's a big win, right, Tim? Like that was a big win.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those. There's a couple of moments where, and this is the beauty of this punk platform for me, was like I'm like sort of an introvert. I don't, in school, I didn't like doing oral recording, that kind of shit. I didn't want to be in front of people. My draw into punk is like there's shit in my that like, am I fucking crazy? And like bands like Suicidal Tendencies and shit like that would speak to me, right? Like, all right, maybe I'm not the only fucking crazy person.
Ooh, I like that vector. I never really thought about that too much, too. Like, yeah, that kind of that rambly, suicidal thing, like letting things out that just seem pent up. Like, they're definitely a band that maybe really like hit on that frustration. There's a frustration to their music. It's not just angry. There's like frustration there that's like so palpable that I'm like,
And it's funny because I didn't consciously, but that was a soundtrack of my high school part of the song. And it was my wife who pointed it out to me. She's like, it sort of reminded me of that Suicidal Tendencies record. Especially that song about Pepsi or whatever, right? Like, and I was like, holy fuck. Yeah, like those are my formative years of just becoming a fan, right? And just this idea of like frustrating storytelling over good music, sharing something that makes you feel crazy, that the act of sharing it tells other people they're not crazy.
Yeah.
That's so much of what I try to do. Like, it's like, that to me is like what I do in a nutshell, right? Like, and I'm like, I hate bullies. I hate when I fall short. That's what drives my lyrics. But yeah, it's funny. And I feel blessed that I've landed with amazing musicians that somehow become good at what I do, which is completely unorthodox. And I just get to do this fucking weird like at this point, I don't even know if I sing the song the same way twice. a lot of this shit. You know, it's like written in a way. I was very inspired actually by Deadguy, where so many of their songs, I saw them so many times, and their songs would change, would evolve, they would riff, so that it didn't become stale sort of.
Yeah, and but also the way that they would, you know, you'd have to be prepared to play any song at any time, no set lists and stuff. There's always such an organic quality to that band, and that's one of the things that, you know, after No Escape, right? You had kind of that to me is like, okay, we got hardcore band, you know, but then and it's like, cool. And I honestly, you know, I'm 37, so I'm like, I'm starting at like Kiss It Goodbye, really, like Deadguy, Kiss It Goodbye, kind of crux there, you know, and then I had to go back and like study up, okay, you know, and but Deadguy, it was like, okay, you saw like the glimpses, the flashes of those things in No Escape, but Deadguy, I felt like gave you the canvas musically to really like spread that out. What was it like getting Deadguy together and also kind of crafting that canvas, you know what I mean, between, you know, just creating something that like I think perfectly, I mean, it captures that tension that you kind of bring in your vocal style.
So No Escape was that necessary first band, still like a lot of that stuff, right? But it's also what I did when I was like 19, 20. You know, you're never the best at what you first try to do. I tell my kids this all the time. Start it fucking great. Start it okay, or maybe even suck. Move your way up. You know, like my kids are like, I can't fucking do this. I'm like, that's because you started yesterday. You know, but I liked No Escape. I liked our approach, right? We tried to be different in the confines of hardcore. We weren't trying to blaze in. We were letting sort of other things influence us. But it's funny because like Quicksand, which I fucking love, they also did this thing to the hardcore scene where like they were sort of so accessible, so good, that major labels were interested. And now I have people I knew forever, like, you know, if you sang more, or the band, like, yeah, if you sang more, shit. And I was like, that's not why I got this shit. Like, that's not me. There's plenty of people who do. And that's sort of, that basically broke up Escape. That, and I think it was sort of fun. So Deadguy, I just randomly ran into Dave, and we just got together and jammed. We didn't think anything of it, but I made a promise to myself. I'm not like typical prescribed hardcore. Like, I'm not going to talk about the government or edge or B or whatever topics are predictable. I was like, I'll write about those if it moves me, or I'll write about the fucking dirt on my shoe if it moves me. Like, I was just like, I'm going to be as honest as I sort of can be. Or like, that was my exercise, to try to just let shit bleed out. And the fact that they were also in a way musically trying to like nothing was too crazy. We didn't know if we sucked or if it was great. You know what I mean? We were like, we literally do a show after practice sometimes go, I don't know, do we suck? Like, it didn't sound anything. We looked up like Kathleen Killman and the Cows and Today's the Day and like other shit and whatever. Like, not ripping off, but like, you know, we were just pulling influence everywhere, not writing mosh parts, doing all this stuff that our resumes would have you think we would do. And just sort of like writing what we wanted to hear. And I was like writing lyrics the way I wanted them to be. There was a reaction against like No Escape and like that need to rock. And what Quicksand did through no fault of their own, because they're fucking amazing, but they should have been this one amazing thing next to another. But everybody tried to be that, right? Like, this happened in the scene. In fact, everybody tried to be Youth of Today. I love Youth of Today. I didn't love the bands that sounded like them. Love Quicksand. I don't need another 10 fucking bands to try to sound like them. I thought it
and
was.
also, let's be honest too. Those other 10 bands are not going to sound like them. They're going to be like,
Yeah.
There's going to be a depreciation of the vibe there too. You know, sometimes I'm sitting there and booking bands. I'm like, oh, okay. Ooh, guys, you know, I know this is popular nowadays, but I don't need the fucking 700th old school death metal band out there, guys. I've listened to Bolt Thrower before.
And it's like, they're not even referencing the source material, right? Like, if you understand today, you understand SSD and DYS, bands like that, that sort of informed what they're doing. But if all you do is rip off people today, it's getting watered down, right? And it was like, we'll write a mock part, we'll have an intro and a mock part and a chorus, backup vocals, and whatever. More power to this guy. That shit started to look like pep rallies. It started to look like the high school I fucking hated. I wanted to do shit that was ugly. I wanted to reach the fucking freaks that I felt like I was a freak in school. I wanted to speak to them. Like, I wanted to share what's in my head in a way that resonates with people. That's just on the lyrical front, right?
Absolutely.
But that's where Deadguy came from. We were just, I think, almost like just free to do whatever the fuck we want.
Sure.
We weren't sure if it sucked.
But I think that's kind of fun, though. It's like you're challenging even your own scene and your own notions. And when you're there, you're in dangerous territory of potential mockery, but you're also in good territory of like, yeah, what are we hitting on here, though? And if you're doing that, then you're somewhere else at the very least. Might not be good, but you know you're somewhere else.
Right. And the funny thing is, like, you know, recently Deadguy, we've been chatting or hanging out before the pandemic. And we're still that way. We're still like, I don't know why people give a fuck. Like, we're just assholes from New Jersey who just made some noise. But I do think there's something, you know, if I'm being serious, there is something about that, right? Like, which to me it captures like what bands I grew up on did, right? Like, the Dead Kennedys are fucking surf punk. What the fuck is that? Like, before they did, or whatever. Like, Black Flag did some crazy shit.
Yeah.
Like, so, I mean, what's the point if you're not sort of pushing that envelope?
Yeah, and being too safe. So like you were saying, those guys were kind of, their ambitions were sonically to push it, and then you were kind of pushing it from like this sort of thematic and vocal level. What was it like, kind of getting together? I mean, you guys had a couple of 7-inches, right? I think 2, and then and then obviously, you know, Fixation on the Coworker, which is like, you know, kind of the magnum opus, right? With a little dude, you know, guy going to work, you know, and I'm like, that's my guy.
I think I was obsessed with the fact that I was graduating college and nothing but misery awaited me, you know.
But and thematically, I feel like, you know, you really hit on like this sort of frustration with everyday life that nobody was really talking about at the time. Like, it felt like lyrically and stuff like that, you know, everything was more Snapcase, Earth Crisis, and stuff like that, which is cool, you know, but you guys were coming at things in such a kind of different level. What was it like to just record that record? And, you know, were there things that were surprising you when you were really like hearing it all back for the first time? And how did that kind of come together for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, we hooked up a Steve Evans, and it was
great.
And it was hugely important. Like, I'd recorded a bunch of times with guys who didn't understand anything we were doing, especially my vocals. And Steve got it, right? And I think his enthusiasm and talent really added to that record, right? And added to our confidence. So I think that was this like sort of match made in heaven. And I think, like, as you recorded it, I don't remember sitting around going, we've got the 10 best fucking songs ever, we got to go record it.
Sure.
I remember thinking, this is coming out really fucking awesome. Like, it's finally like sounding like what I think it's supposed to sound like. Because recording is a beast, as I'm sure you're aware, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, it's always like there's certain things that, again, if you're in these practice spaces or other things like that, it's like, oh man, I thought it was more like nah, you know, or like even the details start hitting you different ways. And like, you know, some bands are really prepared too when they roll in, like super prepared, and some aren't, you know what I mean? And like, you know, how much Steve takes a little bit apart and being like, oh, let's move this here, or, you know, that to me is always really interesting. Or like, it seems like from what you were saying, your approach, like you probably had both like your lyrics and vocals like ready to rock.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, like we played out a ton, right? So I did those songs inside and out. I, you know, did that in very few takes. So like that's a nice thing to go into the studio not figuring shit out, you know, like that's a nightmare. And yeah, I mean, Steve knew how to record my vocals, was a big part of it. That's a huge part of it. Like I can't stand, and I hate sounding sort of like sort of centered artist, or, but you know, putting me in some booth, some expensive covered in sort of pantyhose, and like you know, I like holding the mic, and I don't give a shit. It's not the fucking perfect thing. I'm like, he's like there's that, like there's that funny mantra, like the demo is better. Like there's always an energy to a demo.
Yeah.
Sometimes you lose when you over-engineer a recording, trying to get like you punch in the snare because someone flubs something, punch in this and you punch in that, and the whole thing sort of robotic.
Yeah, it starts losing like just its soul, like its spirit, and again, it's like the organic quality of like people playing, you know, like people make this.
And I think
like
Steve,
people.
I gotta give Steve just a ton of credit. I feel like he's a master at not over-engineering. But keep in mind, this is like 95 or something, right? Like, so I remember we're at the studio, and Steve's like, you know, this is back when there'd be 24 tracks, everything's on tape, and you know, you listen to a song, and they have to remember all these fucking moves, right? Like the engineer would be like, okay, this part, I pulled the bass down and whatever. And he was like, check this out. And he fucking did all these, and then he played it back, and the controls were themselves because he recorded the movie floppy disk, and that was like groundbreaking.
Yeah, like the automations.
Yeah, like that was like, you were like, holy fuck, like that's amazing.
Yeah, the first Primitive Weapon 7-inch, we recorded it all to tape with Alex Newport, and he did that, and he's like, mate, but you never seen this in person before. And like, you know, it's like a computer could do, but I was like, no, I haven't, honestly. So it was cutting edge to me in a different way, or maybe like vintage, you know. I was like, whoa.
But you know, the other thing he did was like he would like record cassette, and we'd go down to the band van and play the songs in the van, because that's how, like, you hear this shit in these fucking incredible speakers that cost more than any piece of equipment we have, and everything sounds fucking amazing. It sounds like you're at a fucking Rush concert, right? But you got to go into your fucking van and see if that song, especially when you're doing crazy shit like us.
You know who else would do that? Dr. Dre.
Really?
Dr. Dre was always about the car test, man. It's like 100%. That's why he was like the master of really, like, you know, getting that super low end West Coast sound, because he would always go to the car and make sure that it resonated the right way, like, for that culture. So you're right.
I mean, it's like where especially today, it's like where are 90% of people listening to shit? Like, I don't know if you can make shit sound good on a laptop.
Yeah.
Because that's just kind of sad, but
it is kind of sad, man. Manic compression indeed.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely it's interesting to sort of see, you know, where technologies are going and different things. But you know, like, you're a big fan. Everybody in the band, Keith Huckins is coming from Rorschach. You know, we got like real motherfuckers in here. Nick Forte, love him. Amazing musician, done tons of weird, awesome shit. Shout out to Nick. But it's like, if you can find that moment where you capture the spirit, like, yo, I'd be listening to this on the subway in Manhattan, or like in, you know, certain music to me, like reminds me of certain environments, right? Or I can imagine things happening. And that's sort of the thing that for me, that it gave me like the themes of the record. I could just imagine, or I thought about it really myself. Like when I was like, man, I'm like going to some fucking bullshit job. I'm like, commuting, and I'm just like, fucking, these motherfuckers don't get me. You know what I mean? I'm like, some dude, whatever, like dressing off wild and shit. And that's the soundtrack there. I'm like, this is the grinding commute soundtrack for people like me. And when I got into college, honestly, with this, after I first heard Deadguy, that's when it really connected with me. I'm like, I know what this motherfucker is talking about.
Right. And I was consciously, I think, that was part of like me writing well, and just writing about what I'm going through. It turned out to be, I think, somewhat universal. But yeah, I mean, and at the same time, I don't think it's right. I think it's weird, like our society. Now I have a kid in college, so I think about this. I'm like, fuck, man. She's still at that point where it's all about expanding your mind and meeting new people and learning shit. And then, like, when you're done with that, we're like, fuck you, get a job. You're no longer defined by your interests. You're defined by your stock portfolio or your paycheck or your 401k or the fucking car you drive. All the shit that's so not fucking interesting.
Yeah.
And college is when you meet people still based on what you're interested in. If you're lucky to go to college, I think it's a great environment. Or punk, right? Like, especially like a punk. Like, if you don't have like that, I'm like, all we've prescribed for you is fucking misery. Like, what's the, you know what I mean? Like, that's all we can come up with is give a shit about all these fucking things because that gets you to go to work every day. And I know I sound almost like a cliche punk rock, whatever, but I think those are like on my mind. Like, I'm at this fucking threshold. And that's not the only reason. But that theme came through graphics, but everything I do is sort of organic. I don't really sit down and write a thesis and I'm like, Deadguy's about the attack on the blue collar mentality, blah blah blah. Like even like naming shit like work ethic. I always thought work ethic was a funny thing. I remember having a debate with somebody where he's like, just the idea that you work hard means like somehow good. Like, fuck that. If you work hard making bagels for some asshole who's getting rich off of your fucking hard work, that's just fucking skilled to you to fucking turn you into a fucking cog. So anyway, these are the things that are like swimming in my head, and I'm
but that's great though because it's like, in a way, like you said, it's unfortunate that it's so relatable. But it really is because these are, the capitalist pillars of our fucking society, and
right.
There's a lot of dehumanization in the details, not in the necessarily right. Like Trump sucks, duh, absolutely yes, but in the details of like the day to day, the things that you're feeling on the inside of like just your fucking experience of feeling the effects of those things and all the different ways, and you just kind of setting it up that way. I feel like at the time too, it was this big like, I am straight edge, I am these things, and you brought it down to this sort of very personal and awesome level. Let me ask you a question about this. I mean, that record has endured and then also been celebrated, and I've often had probably a couple too many of these and been at Saint Vitus. I'm like, you put on Die With Your Mask On, and if I told you it was a new band, maybe that past band you heard this year, but it really kind of still captures that. And obviously, Decibel put you guys in the Hall of Fame and things like that. What's it like to just kind of feel like, wow, this really like out there idea that I had, whatever, 20 years ago is still here?
To be honest, it feels good, right? Like, cause like I think maybe part of the enduring quality of it is that I was trying desperately not to be self-righteous. I to put myself above. I had enough of that from bands that seemed to like have shit figured out and then tell you what's wrong with everything and preach. And even if I agree with you, right? Like I haven't eaten meat in decades. Like I'm a total animal rights, but I don't come down on people. I try not to judge people. It's that simple, right? So I think that helps it endure. But it's gratifying that something like there's very few things in life that you do that decades later people give a shit, right? So I feel like I didn't set off with any ambition other than like it'd be cool to record. It'd be cool if a record up on vinyl or a tour. Like I played CBGBs. That was like a fucking bucket list thing. Check did that a couple times. Like that felt. I had to like pinch myself a little bit, bring me back to being that kid sitting in front. So there's that circle kind of, but yeah, I don't know. I feel extremely fortunate. Something I with 4 other guys, which is like having like 5 marriages. Somehow 5 dumbasses who didn't really even know each other. I didn't know any of those guys. I knew Keith a little bit. I met Dave on the street. Dave introduced me to Christy and Tim Nauman, the bass player, was like around, and we liked him. So we're like, here, you play bass. Like
honestly, when I see the picture of you guys, like, Decibel Hall of Fame article, I'm like, and this is true of a lot of bands that I'm like, not only how do these people know each other, but how the fuck did they make music together? Like in LA, it just seems like I look at you look at a picture of the birthday party, or like I don't know what the fuck is going on there, but I like it. It's for me. This is the freak bin, and I'm in it. Okay. We don't have a ton of time left, so I want to really briefly touch on Kiss It Goodbye, because obviously that came afterwards. You and Keith moved to Seattle. What was this?
Yeah.
To Seattle?
So I was done with school, and when I wasn't, on tour with Deadguy, I knew like New York City from it was miserable. I'd be on the fucking New Jersey Turnpike wanting to kill people with this fucking commute. Literally, like I would scream at the top of my lungs in my car sometimes if I'm fucking like, life is fucking short, fucking thin box with all these assholes who feel the need to get one fuck further than me when they're merging to pay a fucking toll. So that was like I was already fed up with that shit, and then that guy went on tour. The sort of like fell apart. The wheels were falling off that long. We sort of got marooned in Seattle, and one of my best friends from college was in grad school in Seattle, so I stayed with him, and I had a grand old time. I don't think the rest of the band did because they were sort of home. And so that started to form 2 camps, like me and Keith versus the other guys a little bit. And I'd fallen in love with Seattle, and I was like, I can't live in New Jersey anymore. I'm going to move to Seattle. That guy's just going to tour and do shit like that. And I told everybody except Dave because he wasn't around. And then I was like, guys, let me tell Dave. But of course, they told Dave I had to change it. And in passive aggressive, dorks in a kind of way, Dave was like, fuck that. Like, I think I wanted the whole band to move. The whole thing just, and Keith was like, hey man, I can get fucking Andrew Tom from Rorschach to be our rhythm section, and we can start a whole new thing. Like, well, that sounds kind of fun,
That's
right?
promising. Yeah,
like to Seattle, they don't give a shit. I'm like, well, that sounds kind of cool. And so the whole thing sort of happens. There wasn't a ton of confrontation. It was more, it was like a women's breakup, honestly. A lot of it's on me. That's the way I handle it. But also, I was like, in my mind, I was like, Black Sabbath didn't always have Ozzy. Van Halen had different things. It's like, I'm not that.
Yeah.
and maybe in my mind I do think I'm that special, but at the same time I was like, whatever. If they want to keep the name, I'm the one who did this. I'll move on and do my next thing. I was always willing to do things.
Got it.
So that's how it happened. And then Kissing Goodbye, I think our only mindset was, we're going to practice harder than Deadguy ever practiced. We're going to practice all the time and just be so fucking ridiculous and just try to take it up a notch.
Definitely. And I think that you achieved that, like, largely in a way that brought you almost into a new sound, which is great. And I love Kissing Goodbye too. But I feel like it was like, yeah, they're just different elements, and also probably, you know, Keith really, and, you know, you're young, you know, people get better and better, you know, it's like a different season, a different team, and all of a sudden they're going out, like, you know, they make a different move, you know what I mean? And like, you're like, wow, they're playing great, but they're playing in a whole new style, you know? And that was what it was sort of like. And like, for me, like I said, I kind of got in, Kiss It Goodbye was what was happening, and I was just getting into hardcore, but everyone was like, yo, but they came from this band, and they're from New Jersey. And I was like, oh my God, New Jersey, amazing. All right, cool. So that was definitely, you know, a thing there. So then, you know, Kiss It Goodbye goes. We haven't heard from Tim Singer, you know, you doing art and things like that. But then all of a sudden, as of how long ago did Bitter Branches step up?
Oh, so did you talk about the gap between Kissing Goodbye and Bitter Branches?
Yeah, is that like the child gap?
Yeah, basically. Yeah, I thought you know, it's not like you retire. It's not like you cash in and start collecting your pension from the hardcore scene or something. But, you know, like certain things like Process Black pulled me back into it. Like Aaron sent me some tunes and was like, these, and that got me sort of triggered again. But that was really hard because it was fake, and I had to go into a studio that paid by the hour to try to do vocals. So that was hard, but it got me sort of back into it. And then Every Time I Die reached out to me to do guest vocals on part of a song, and that got me. So little things started to kind of come back into my world. It was always a little bit morbid. You know, like the Venn diagram went from like my whole life to it was barely part of my life, and now like my kids think it's interesting, and they're fine. They're all sort of solid on their own tracks. And then Bitter Branches literally happened because my daughters were at a birthday party for their teacher doing Facebook as the older kid, and my drummer from Bitter Branches was there as a dad with younger kids who's their teacher. And their teacher also saw No Escape back in the day, because that's how this world works in Philly. Like, everybody's seen everything. So I start getting texts from my daughter like, yeah, I met a guy at a birthday party, and he knows me back in the day, because he was in Walleye played that guy. And then so I'm now meeting the drummer for coffee. I think we're just going to shoot the shit. And he's like, I want you to be in my band. So the whole thing happened in a weird way because of our kids. It's a funny kid connection.
The old daddy hardcore scene.
You know, and we're all like I fucking love Bitter Branches. Like, it's really fun. We were just getting rolling, and you know, we like sort of were taking our worship of bands like Birthday Party, Laughing Hyenas, Jesus Lizard, etc., and putting that on steroids and doing whatever the fuck it is that I do. And again, it's one of those. There are no rules. There's no like, we've already adopted that attitude of anything goes. Like, any kind of song, we'll shot. And, so it reminds me of Deadguy in that spirit. We're not trying to sound like we definitely have our heroes, but we're trying to sound like ourselves. We're trying to influence places that are not obvious, you know, but that are sort of close to our musical, lyrical hearts.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it sounds great, and I feel like it's like a fitting for your voice, and super cool. And you guys, you know, if you like what Tim's done before, it's definitely him. unmistakably, but over like this really, yeah, to me, I think like Laughing Hyenas makes a lot of sense. A lot of kind of like noise rocky, touch and go,
Yeah.
Unsane. If we're going a little bit northeast, kind of vibe. Really, really cool. So definitely check out Bitter Branches. It's fucking rad. So we only got like 3 more minutes. So I just want to kind of wrap up a little bit. So Tim, thanks so much for joining us and hanging out. It was a total pleasure. I'm a geek, and you're right. So it's been really cool. Where could people find Bitter Branches online?
We're on Bandcamp. We have an Instagram thing at Bitter Branches. We're on Atomic Action, the record label that's like got verbal bullshit. It's Brian Simmons. He's like old school. We loved connecting with him because of our love for verbal assault. Yeah, and he's booked Fugazi shit like that. So he's just someone like-minded. He's chill. He only puts out music he likes. He doesn't give a shit about it. So he's put out the vinyl and stuff like that. And we were working on booking shit. There's a ton of great new bands out there,
one of the ones that we had was Rob Fish's new band and Bitter Branches, and I was ready to put that shit together, baby. I was ready to go. So hopefully, post pandemic, we won't be talking to each other. We'll be playing music together and all communing and hanging out. So Tim, thanks a ton, man. Really appreciate you coming on, and hopefully I'll see you soon. Take care.
All right.
Peace.
Thanks, man.